The tournament hall buzzed with predatory anticipation as 200 chess enthusiasts packed into the Metropolitan Convention Center, their eyes fixed on the absurd spectacle unfolding at Board 1. At the center sat Elena Vasquez, 42 years old, dressed in a faded yellow cardigan and worn jeans, her graying hair pulled back in a simple bun secured with what appeared to be a pencil. She looked utterly out of place among the sharp suits and designer chess sets, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she arranged her pieces with the careful precision of someone who had never touched anything so valuable. Across from her sat Marcus Blackwood, the tournament's reigning champion, his $3,000 Italian suit catching the overhead lights as he leaned back in his chair with theatrical disdain. The crowd pressed closer, phones already recording what promised to be the most entertaining mismatch in chess tournament history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced with the kind of cruel satisfaction that comes from publicly crushing the defenseless, "today we witness what happens when delusion meets reality. This woman thinks she can challenge the Manhattan Chess Club's elite with whatever she learned playing online games." He gestured dismissively at Elena's simple plastic pieces, a stark contrast to his handcrafted Staunton set worth more than most people's monthly rent. "I'm giving her white pieces out of courtesy, though I doubt she understands the advantage that represents." The audience erupted in knowing laughter, the sound sharp and vicious in the acoustically perfect hall. Tournament director Jonathan Pierce stepped forward, his voice dripping with barely concealed embarrassment. "Ms. Vasquez, are you certain you want to proceed? This is a rated tournament with master-level players. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our beginner section downstairs." Elena's fingers found the worn leather chess timer at her side, pressing it gently as she lifted her eyes to meet Marcus's gaze. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said quietly, her voice carrying an odd weight that made the front row unconsciously lean forward. But Marcus was already savoring his moment of triumph, his laugh cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "Then let's get this over with quickly. I have a real match scheduled in an hour." What none of them knew, what couldn't possibly have guessed from her unremarkable appearance and nervous demeanor, was that they were watching the return of a ghost. The woman they dismissed as another delusional amateur had once been called the most brilliant tactical mind in the history of chess, a player whose combinations were studied in universities and whose games were considered works of art. They were about to witness something that would shatter every assumption in that room, beginning with a single move that would render Marcus Blackwood's $3,000 suit as worthless as tissue paper. Elena Vasquez lived in a studio apartment in Queens where the walls were thin enough to hear her neighbors' conversations and the radiator clanked through winter nights like a mechanical heartbeat. At 42, she moved through life with the deliberate invisibility of someone who had learned that being noticed meant being hurt. Her daily routine was as predictable as clockwork: rise at 5 a.m., brew coffee in a chipped mug from the discount store, and catch the 6:15 bus to the Queens Public Library, where she worked as a part-time assistant, shelving books and helping elderly patrons navigate the computer system. Her wardrobe consisted of 5 interchangeable outfits from various thrift stores, all in neutral colors designed to blend into any environment. She carried her lunch in a brown paper bag, ate alone on a bench outside the library, and spent her evenings reading mystery novels from the damaged book cart. Her co-workers knew her as the quiet woman who never called in sick, never complained about overtime, and seemed to have no life beyond the Dewey Decimal System. They never noticed how her eyes tracked the geometry of the library's architecture, calculating angles and patterns with unconscious precision. They never saw her fingers moving in complex sequences while she walked, practicing combinations that existed only in her memory. Elena had been invisible for 12 years, and that was exactly how she needed to be. Until yesterday, when she'd seen the advertisement for the Manhattan Chess Club's open tournament and felt something she'd thought was permanently dead stir in her chest. The hunger to play real chess again, to feel the electric tension of a position balanced on the knife's edge of tactical possibility. She'd registered under her current name, listing her rating as unrated amateur, and paid the $50 entry fee with quarters and crumpled bills saved from her library salary. What the tournament organizers couldn't have known was that Elena Vasquez had once been Elena Petrov, the youngest Grandmaster in history, the woman who had revolutionized chess theory with her innovative approach to positional sacrifice. 12 years ago, she had been poised to challenge for the World Championship, her rating soaring toward heights that would have placed her among the greatest players who ever lived. But that was before the scandal that destroyed everything, before the betrayal that cost her not just her career, but the only person who had ever truly understood her gifts. Before she learned that sometimes the price of excellence is everything you hold dear. 12 years earlier, Elena Petrov had stood in the spotlight of the Moscow chess palace, 30 years old and radiating the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are operating at the absolute peak of human capability. The chess world buzzed with excitement about the prodigy who had emerged from nowhere to dominate the Grandmaster circuit with a style that seemed to transcend traditional analysis. She combined the positional understanding of the classical masters with tactical innovation that left opponents studying her games for months afterward, trying to understand how she saw patterns that remained invisible to even the world's elite. Her meteoric rise had attracted the attention of Viktor Kozlov, a respected coach and former world championship candidate who had built his reputation developing young talent. Under his guidance, Elena's natural gifts had evolved into something approaching chess perfection. They worked 18-hour days, analyzing positions until her understanding reached levels that seemed almost supernatural. But their relationship had become more than professional, developing into a partnership that extended far beyond the chessboard. Viktor had been the one person who truly understood the burden of her exceptional mind, who could match her analytical intensity while providing the emotional support that allowed her genius to flourish. They had planned to marry after her world championship match, building a future around their shared passion for the infinite complexity of 64 squares. The betrayal had come 3 weeks before the biggest match of her life. Elena had returned to their shared apartment to find Viktor hunched over his computer, uploading detailed files of her preparation, her secret analytical work, and her psychological profiles of potential opponents to an encrypted server. When she demanded an explanation, his response had shattered her understanding of everything she believed about love, trust, and human nature. "The Chinese Federation offered me $2 million for your complete preparation," he'd said without shame, without even the pretense of guilt. "Do you think I was going to spend my life as some woman's coaching assistant? This is my chance to be independent, to have my own chess school, my own reputation." The files he was selling contained not just her opening innovations, but her deepest strategic concepts, the psychological insights that allowed her to outmaneuver opponents who were theoretically her equals. It was intellectual theft on a scale that would cripple her chances and potentially end her career before it reached its peak. When she tried to stop him, Viktor had made a call that brought tournament officials to their door within minutes. He'd prepared for this moment, creating evidence that painted Elena as unstable, claiming she'd threatened him, suggesting her recent dominance came from computer assistance rather than pure talent. The chess world, already suspicious of any player who rose too quickly, had been eager to believe the accusations. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in character assassination. Viktor had documentation showing Elena's erratic behavior, testimony from players who claimed her moves were too perfect to be entirely human, and analysis suggesting her recent games showed patterns consistent with computer assistance. The circumstantial evidence was carefully constructed, each piece designed to create doubt about her legitimacy, while positioning Viktor as a concerned mentor trying to protect the integrity of the game. Elena's attempts to defend herself were seen as further proof of her instability. The Chess Federation, facing pressure to address computer cheating in the wake of several high-profile scandals, had made her an example. Her rating was suspended pending investigation, her world championship opportunity was revoked, and her reputation was systematically destroyed by people who had once celebrated her brilliance. The deepest wound wasn't the professional destruction or the public humiliation, but discovering that Viktor had been planning this betrayal for months, studying her weaknesses not to help her improve, but to find ways to exploit them when the time came. He positioned himself perfectly to benefit from her downfall, eventually using the money from selling her analysis to establish a prestigious chess academy that traded on his reputation as the coach who had discovered the truth about her supposed cheating. Elena had watched from the shadows as Viktor's school attracted top players from around the world, all eager to learn from the man who had sacrificed his career to expose corruption in chess. The night she'd left Moscow, Elena had packed only the essentials, including a small wooden chess set her grandmother had given her as a child. She'd taken a flight to New York with a tourist visa and simply vanished from the chess world entirely, allowing Elena Petrov to die while Elena Vasquez was born in the anonymity of Queens. For 12 years, she'd avoided tournament halls, chess clubs, and anywhere she might be recognized. She'd buried her gifts so deeply that sometimes she could almost forget she possessed them, finding peace in the simple rhythms of library work and the companionship of books that didn't judge or betray. But chess was like breathing for someone of her caliber, and complete abstinence had proven impossible. Late at night, alone in her apartment, she would solve complex in-game positions in her head, working through variations that existed only in her imagination. She played against herself, analyzing games from memory, keeping her skills sharp while praying she would never need them again. Until yesterday, when she'd seen Marcus Blackwood's photo in the tournament advertisement and recognized something in his eyes that she'd seen before. The same predatory arrogance that had made Victor's betrayal possible. The same assumption that talent belonged only to those who looked the part, who had the right credentials, who moved in the right social circles. The decision to enter the tournament hadn't been rational. But Elena had spent 12 years being rational, and rationality had brought her nothing but loneliness and regret. This time, she would trust her instincts and see where they led. The tournament hall fell into an expectant hush as Elena's hand hovered over her king's pawn, the simple gesture somehow carrying more weight than anyone in the room could understand. Marcus leaned back in his chair, already composing the social media post that would immortalize his swift victory over the delusional amateur. Tournament officials checked their watches, calculating how quickly they could clear board one for the next scheduled match. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised to capture what promised to be a brief and humiliating encounter. Elena's fingers touched the pawn, and for a moment time seemed suspended in the perfect silence that precedes revelation. Then she moved, and the world shifted on its axis. 1.e4. The king's pawn advanced 2 squares, the most common opening move in chess history, played by billions of beginners and grandmasters alike. Nothing special, nothing unexpected, just a simple development that followed basic principles any amateur would know. The crowd began to murmur with disappointed amusement, already losing interest in what appeared to be exactly the predictable amateur play they'd expected. Marcus responded instantly with 1e5, the equally common king's pawn defense, his movements casual and dismissive as he prepared to demonstrate the gulf between his theoretical knowledge and her presumed ignorance. But Elena's second move changed everything. 2.f3, developing the knight to attack the black pawn, was again perfectly standard. Marcus continued with 2.nc6, defending the center, his confidence growing with each ordinary move. The position looked like something from a beginner's textbook, simple and straightforward, exactly what everyone expected from the mismatch pairing. Then Elena played 3.bb5, and the first person in the front row gasped audibly. The Ruy Lopez, also known as the Spanish opening, one of the most sophisticated and theoretically complex systems in all of chess. But it wasn't just the choice of opening that made the spectator react. It was the way Elena moved the piece, placing it on the exact center of the square with the kind of precision that only comes from having played the position thousands of times. Her hand never wavered, never hesitated, never showed the uncertainty that should have accompanied an amateur attempting such an advanced opening. Marcus's casual confidence flickered for the first time as he realized he was facing not just the Ruy Lopez, but someone who clearly understood its subtleties. He responded with 3.a6, the Morphy defense, one of the most thoroughly analyzed systems in chess theory, requiring deep preparation to navigate successfully. Elena's reply came without pause, 4.ba4, maintaining the tension and steering toward one of the sharpest variations in the opening. By the fifth move, when Elena played 5.0-0, castling kingside with a fluid motion that spoke of muscle memory carved by years of practice, the murmur in the crowd had changed quality entirely. This wasn't amateur play stumbling through basic principles. This was precise, theoretical chess being executed with the kind of authority that only comes from mastery. Marcus found himself thinking longer about each move, his casual dismissal replaced by growing uncertainty as he realized his opponent's understanding of the position was far deeper than her appearance suggested. The breakthrough moment came on move 8. Elena had steered the game into the Briar variation, one of the most complex and theory-heavy lines in the entire Ruy-Lopez system, a variation that required not just memorization but deep understanding of pawn structures, piece coordination, and long-term strategic planning. When she played 8d6, the move that defined the Briar system, her execution was so fluid and confident that several grandmasters in the audience exchanged meaningful glances. Dr. Sarah Chun, a respected chess author watching from the third row, leaned forward with sudden intensity. Something about Elena's move selection was triggering a memory, a familiar pattern of play that she couldn't quite place, but that felt hauntingly familiar. She pulled out her phone and began frantically searching through chess databases, looking for games with similar opening choices and tactical themes. Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering that his opponent's understanding of the position was not just competent, but superior to his own. Every move she made improved her position slightly, gaining space, coordinating her pieces, creating the kind of subtle pressure that gradually transforms a balanced position into something dangerous. He found himself burning time on his clock, calculating variations that Elena seemed to navigate instinctively. When Elena played 12b7, developing her bishop with a quiet move that somehow managed to be both positionally sound and tactically threatening, Marcus felt the first real stirring of concern. This wasn't how the game was supposed to go. He was the master, the club champion, the player with years of tournament experience and theoretical knowledge. Yet he found himself in an increasingly uncomfortable position against someone who should have been overwhelmed by the complexity of master-level chess. The position continued to evolve, each of Elena's moves building pressure like water behind a dam. She wasn't playing for quick tactical shots or obvious attacks, but constructing the kind of deep positional advantage that gradually strangles an opponent's possibilities. Her pieces found their optimal squares as if drawn by magnetic force, creating harmony and coordination that made Marcus's army appear clumsy and disconnected by comparison. By move 15, the tournament director had stopped checking his watch and was studying the board with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for games between established masters. Other players began abandoning their own games to watch, recognizing that something extraordinary was happening at board 1. The woman they had dismissed as a delusional amateur was systematically outplaying one of their strongest members, not through luck or accident, but through superior understanding of chess at its deepest level. Elena's face remained serene throughout the building tension, her expression betraying nothing of the calculations racing through her mind. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who could see 10 moves ahead, who understood not just the immediate tactical consequences of each decision, but their long-term strategic implications. Each piece she developed seemed to find its perfect square, creating a position of such harmony and potential that even casual observers could sense its dangerous beauty. The crowd's mood had transformed completely from mocking laughter to respectful silence, then to growing amazement as they witnessed a level of chess that transcended their expectations. Phones that had been raised to capture a quick humiliation now recorded what was becoming a masterclass in positional domination. Marcus, trapped in a position that grew more difficult with each passing move, finally understood that he was not facing an amateur who had gotten lucky, but someone whose understanding of chess operated on a level he could barely comprehend. The woman across from him moved with the unconscious authority of someone who had spent years at the absolute pinnacle of the game. And as that realization dawned, Marcus felt his carefully constructed confidence crumble like sand in an hourglass. The 20-second move arrived like a thunderclap in a clear sky, shattering the nervous tension that had gripped the tournament hall for the past hour. Elena's hand moved to her queen, lifting the piece with the same deliberate precision she had shown throughout the game, and placed it on h5 with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. 22. QH5. The move looked innocent enough to casual observers, just another piece development in what appeared to be a complex but manageable position. But Marcus Blackwood's face went white as the implications crashed over him like a collapsing building. His hands began to shake as he stared at the board, his mind racing through variations that all led to the same inescapable conclusion. Elena had just announced checkmate in 7 moves, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to prevent it. The silence stretched for long seconds as Marcus calculated and recalculated, searching desperately for a defensive resource that didn't exist. His time ticked away on the clock, each second marking another moment of his growing realization that he had been systematically outplayed by someone he had dismissed as a delusional amateur. Dr. Chun in the third row suddenly gasped, her phone clattering to the floor as the memory that had been nagging at her finally crystallized. She recognized not just the playing style, but the specific tactical pattern, a signature combination that she had studied years ago in her research on chess prodigies. "My God," she whispered, her voice carrying clearly in the absolute silence. "That's the Petrov sacrifice. That's Elena Petrov's signature endgame pattern." The name rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Elena Petrov, the youngest grandmaster in history, the tactical genius who had vanished from the chess world after a scandal that had shaken the foundations of international competition. Elena Petrov, whose games were still studied in chess academies around the world as examples of perfect strategic construction. Elena Petrov, who had been presumed dead or permanently retired, sitting in a faded cardigan at board 1, systematically destroying one of their strongest players with the same quiet authority that had once made her the most feared competitor in the world. Marcus looked up from the board, his eyes meeting Elena's for the first time since the game began, and saw in them the deep wells of knowledge and experience that no amateur could possibly possess. "You're her," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're Elena Petrov." Elena nodded once, a small gesture that confirmed what the crowd was already beginning to understand. The woman they had mocked and dismissed, the apparent amateur who had wandered into their elite tournament, was one of the greatest chess players who had ever lived. The revelation transformed the atmosphere in the hall instantly. Phones began ringing as word spread through the chess community that Elena Petrov had returned, that she was playing again, that she was demonstrating the same incredible ability that had once made her a legend. Tournament officials scrambled to contact international chess organizations, knowing that this game would be analyzed and celebrated for decades to come. But Elena seemed untouched by the chaos swirling around her. She sat quietly, waiting for Marcus to make his move, her expression showing nothing but gentle patience. When he finally resigned, pushing his king over with a trembling hand, she offered him the same courtesy she would have shown to any opponent, extending her hand for the traditional post-game handshake. "Thank you for the game," she said simply, her voice carrying no triumph, no satisfaction at having proven her critics wrong, just the quiet dignity of someone who had found her way back to herself after 12 years in the wilderness. Marcus took her hand, still stunned by what he had experienced. "I had no idea," he stammered. "If I had known who you were, I never would have." "That's exactly why you needed to not know," Elena interrupted gently. "You played your best chess, gave everything you had to the position. That's all any of us can do." She began setting up the pieces for analysis, the traditional post-game discussion where strong players examine key moments and explore alternative possibilities. But as she moved each piece back to its starting position, Elena was thinking not about the game just completed, but about the larger patterns that had brought her to this moment. For 12 years, she had hidden from the chess world, convinced that her gifts had brought her nothing but pain and betrayal. She had believed that excellence was a curse, that standing out meant making yourself a target for those who would use your strength against you. But sitting in this tournament hall, surrounded by people who had gone from mockery to awe in the span of 2 hours, Elena realized that she had been wrong about something fundamental. The problem had never been her abilities or her success, but her failure to understand that gifts come with responsibilities that extend beyond personal achievement. Victor had been able to destroy her because she had been playing chess for herself, for the pure joy of competition and the satisfaction of being the best. But chess at its highest level was never really about individual glory. It was about pushing the boundaries of human understanding, about exploring the infinite possibilities contained within a simple game of logic and imagination. Her talent wasn't just her own. It belonged to everyone who had ever struggled to understand a difficult position, everyone who had ever found beauty in the precise coordination of pieces working toward a common goal. "Ms. Petrov," Dr. Chin approached cautiously, her voice filled with the kind of reverence usually reserved for meeting childhood heroes. I've studied your games for years. That combination you just played, the way you built pressure through pure positional understanding, it's been 12 years since anyone has seen chess at that level. Elena looked up from the board, seeing in Dr. Chen's eyes the same passion for the game that had once driven her own obsession with perfection. Chess doesn't care how long you've been away, she said quietly. The patterns are always there, waiting for someone to discover them. I just remembered how to see them again. The crowd began to disperse as word of Elena's return spread through social media and chess news sites. But many players lingered, hoping for a chance to speak with the legend who had emerged from 12 years of exile. Elena answered their questions patiently, discussing variations and strategic concepts with the same generous spirit she had once reserved for private analysis sessions. But when a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, approached with a notebook full of carefully copied chess positions, Elena's attention focused completely. I've been studying your games, the girl said shyly. My coach says you see patterns that other people miss. How do you do that? Elena knelt down to the girl's eye level, seeing in her eager expression an echo of her own younger self, when chess had been pure joy rather than a burden to be carried. The secret isn't seeing more than other people, she said gently. It's remembering that every position tells a story, and your job is to listen carefully enough to understand what it's trying to say. The pieces want to work together, they want to find harmony. Sometimes you just have to help them find their way. She opened the girl's notebook, showing her how the positions she had copied revealed larger patterns of piece coordination and strategic planning. For the next hour, Elena provided an impromptu lesson that would have cost thousands of dollars from any other player of her caliber, sharing insights that came from years of studying chess at its deepest level. As the tournament hall finally emptied and evening shadows stretched across the floor, Elena sat alone at board one, studying the position from her game with Marcus one final time. She thought about Victor, probably still running his prestigious chess academy, still trading on his reputation as the coach who had exposed her supposed cheating. She felt no anger toward him anymore, no desire for revenge or vindication. His betrayal had been terrible, but it had also taught her something valuable about the difference between achieving excellence and understanding its purpose. Tomorrow, there would be interviews with chess journalists, invitations to prestigious tournaments, offers to coach promising young players, and all the attention that came with being a legend returning from exile. She would have to decide how much of that world she wanted to re-enter, how much publicity she could handle while maintaining the peace she had built in her quiet life in Queens. But tonight, sitting in the darkening tournament hall with only the chessboard for company, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 12 years. The pure satisfaction of playing chess not for personal glory or professional advancement, but for the simple joy of exploring infinite possibility within finite rules. The game had given her back herself, not as Elena Petrov the prodigy or Elena Vasquez the library assistant, but as someone who understood that true mastery came not from defeating others, but from lifting them up to see the beauty that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. What would you have done in her position, having spent 12 years in exile, watching others profit from your pain while you struggled in anonymity? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have found the strength to transform your return into something larger than personal vindication? Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in remembering who you were meant to be all along. Elena Petrov had disappeared into the shadows 12 years ago, broken and betrayed. But the woman who emerged from that tournament hall was someone entirely new, carrying her gifts not as a burden, but as a responsibility to show others that excellence without compassion is just another form of poverty, and that the highest expression of human talent is always found in service to something greater than ourselves.